everyone, and welcome to the Creative Knit Tensions podcast. My name is Tanya, and I'm coming to you from Queens, New York, where I live with my husband and our 3 fur children. I've been pretty sporadic as of late recording this podcast, which is typically a knitting, spinning, crochet, weaving, quilting, sewing, kind of just general craftiness podcast. And I think the last 2 episodes I've kind of explained that I've lost a little bit of my knitting mojo, or not so much that I've lost it, but that it's been waning and waxing and coming and going, and it just really hasn't been stable. It hasn't been something that I can kind of work with. And so I have all of these, knit all the things kind of plans, and I can't knit all the things because I end up getting home from work and I'm sitting on the couch and I want to watch Netflix more than I want to knit something. Or I get frustrated and I'm looking at something and I go, I just don't want to knit this anymore. Or I'm abandoning projects. Or basically I'm being the absolute opposite of how I've traditionally been as a knitter. Traditionally as a knitter, I've been very monogamous. I tend to stick to one project, maybe 2, until it's done. And because of that, I can normally get quick results. It's one of the ways that when I started knitting sweaters, I've been able to get through so many different sweaters. I can, in a good month where I have crafting mojo and, I guess the stars align and all that good stuff, I can get through 1 or 2 sweaters in a month, no problem. It hasn't been lately, though. And on top of that, every single project that I've worked on, and again, as we discussed in the last episode, feels like I do it, and it's such a challenge to do it, and when it's done, it should be something that I feel accomplished, and I feel excited that I did, or at the very least, not annoyed about, but I'm not having that feeling. I'm finishing these projects, and I'm like, yay, something to put on the hanger, joy. I don't have that. I don't have that urge to wear those projects. And so with that, today is June, maybe 11th, I think. I feel like it's June 11th. Michael isn't home, so I thought this would be a good time to kind of pull out the camera and discuss with you guys for a little bit some of my crafting issues. Who better to talk to than your favorite? I think there's some subscribers, but mostly imaginary internet friends who listen to you. To those of you who have visited this podcast before, and I know there's such a small handful of you, I really do genuinely appreciate the time and energy and effort that you've done to stop by and visit my podcast as opposed to the bajillion of others out there. I feel sometimes like every single time I watch one of my favorite podcasts, they're telling me about a brand new podcast that they know and love, and then I add that one into my rotation, and that I know sometimes it can feel really overwhelming. There are all these good podcasts, and some of them are better than others, and I'm not saying mine's, the top-notch, best quality, best content, best thing ever that I think everyone should watch or anything like that, but I do really appreciate you taking the time to sit in my little crafting space with me for however long the episodes are on. If this is your first time visiting this podcast, well, where have you been? I mean, I've been waiting for you, but more seriously, I'm just as equally grateful that you're here spending some time with us as well. This episode will be a little bit different than the typical kind of, hey, here's what I'm finishing, hey, here's what I'm working on, hey, here's what I'm going to work on, hey, here's what I bought, yahoo, kind of party that this podcast and so many other knitting podcasts typically are. Because of that lack of knitting mojo, I thought it might be fun since, primarily I am a sweater knitter, that it might be helpful for me to kind of help reinvigorate that crafting mojo. And it might be kind of, I hope, interesting to you guys if I went through some of my favorite finished sweater objects and kind of explained some of the things that worked really well on them. Some just general sweater tips or tricks that I have, and things like that. I'm not even like kind of explain. In my head, I have this really clear intention of how I'm going to be like, and it's going to be perfect and all that, but I'm not really explaining it well. So I guess you can kind of call this a treaty on sweaters. We're going to look at some sweaters I've made. I'm going to tell you some stuff about them. It's really like nostalgia. If you're a fan of anything Stephanie Pearl McPhee has ever written, or Knitlandia from Clara Parks, or things like that where people talk, or Knitting Yarns, Ann Hood, or anything like that, where people talk nostalgically about things that they've knit, or try to provide helpful advice or tips about things they've knit, you're in luck. It's going to be your new favorite episode. I think it's episode 6. Kind of bookmark it, tell all your friends. If you're not, here's a list of some podcasts you might enjoy right now instead. Today being June, don't even remember. What did I even say the date was? Oh, I lied. Today's June 10th. Some podcasts you may enjoy to turn this one off right now and put on instead. The Yarngasm podcast just released an episode last night. I know that there's an episode earlier this week from Once Upon a Corgi, from The Freakish Lemon. There was a new Grocery Girls episode updated. Everybody loves the Grocery Girls. I know there's kind of special edition of Inside 23. Just some suggestions if that's not your kind of thing. For those of you who will be sticking around, though, great. Let's talk sweaters. So, I'm sorry. I am sorry about the cough. It's just something that happens. I've noticed when I'm talking to people. That sounds so weird. It sounds like I have more severe issues with social anxiety than I do, but it's kind of, I guess, a nervous kind of cough thing that happens sometimes. I notice it sometimes when I'm talking to coworkers at work. It's an issue with kind of asserting myself, and so I do apologize if that comes up every once in a while. But again, for those of you who are sticking around, the 2 of you, give me your addresses. I'll mail you an imaginary e-cookie. But let's get started talking about sweaters. So the weather's been really flip-floppy here in New York, but today it's that little in-between weather that I love. It's cold and windy if you're indoors in the shade. Lovely. But it is hot and hot and hot and hot if you're in the sun. So what better sweater to start with than a short-sleeved one? Now, this sweater, I've talked about before how I typically prefer to work with wools and wool blends exclusively. There's a million reasons for that, how well it blocks, the springiness of it. I'm one of those creepy-ass people who really enjoys the smell of sopping wet wool, that wet dog smell. Just the idea of being that ingrained in kind of a natural environment. I am someone who follows a vegan diet, so I care very passionately about animals and very passionately about where my yarn comes from for that reason. But just the idea that, there's somewhere out there is this sheep that my wool came from. And we're both alive and we're both thriving. And there's something to that makes me very happy. But this sweater is not a wool sweater. No. It is from the cover of Knit Steam Winter 2011. I believe it's called the Camilla Cardigan. It was done in a thick, thin yarn. And it actually, for that issue, and I was thinking about pulling it over, but I'm not going to. For that issue, it had long sleeves. I didn't want long sleeves. Well, actually, I crapped out on doing long sleeves. I had gotten so frustrated. But this was my first contiguous top-down sweater design. So what that means is that's a particular construction of shoulders and seams for your sleeves. And so the yarn this is worked out of is a Knit Picks cotton blend. I believe it might actually be 100% cotton, called Billow. You can kind of see when I lean forward that it's definitely a thick and thin. It's pretty obvious kind of on the shoulder and places like that. It has these 2 lace panels. They go all the way down the front, all the way down both fronts. And then for the sleeves, you're supposed to, pick up from here and do a sleeve. But for me, again, I like wool blends, so working with a traditional cotton yarn was starting to annoy me a little bit. Maybe a little bit more than a little bit, if we're being honest. And I didn't want the sleeves. And the more I thought about it, if you're not familiar with cotton, and if you can't tell from this, there is drape to this. And people say drape, they kind of, sometimes people, you know, it's this kind of like ambiguous thing. It's like, oh, it has drape to it. Of course it has drape to it. Everything has drape to it. It just might not have a lot of loose drape or heavy drape or whatnot. But the cotton yarn has a very heavy drape to it. If I lift it, it will fall. It feels, even though it is very loose on me, here's where I end, here's where the sweater ends. It feels very clingy. It feels like it's weighing me down. It feels like the worst possible thing I could ever get in a swimming pool in. But that being said, this is definitely one of my favorite knits. Not just because it's summer friendly, but because in general, it's a very flattering kind of shape on me. As I'm going to pull kind of the microphone up real quick. It is very, I don't want to say that it's warm, because warm's not the word, and it's not definitely the word you think about when you think about cotton. But it is a very comfortable yarn to wear. I tend to wear it just like this. There's this little funky piece of yarn here is actually from another finished object that you guys will see in a little bit. But I don't actually tend to use the buttons I put on it. I tend to wear it open. Or as, again, this funky little yarn here that I can't seem to undo, I tend to wear it where it's just kind of tied right here. For me, that works. If I went ahead and dipped the buttons, you'd see it works. I didn't put any traditional buttonholes on this. Instead, since it's such a chunky lace weight, I just knew that I could just kind of use some of those indents there. It works. It works fine. If I do a little bit of tugging, it looks great. But typically, it's just not how I like to wear my sweaters, so I don't. One of the things that I definitely learned with this sweater is how fast a bulky weight sweater can go. Even though it's a thick and a thin, it went in no time. The other thing I learned is how open thick and thin sweaters can be. So, I'm trying to kind of hold that up in a way that you can see without having to take it off, but this is not the lace section of this sweater, but you can see how open that is. And so it's a nice detail for certain things, and it was great in this sweater. Would I want it in every sweater? Probably not. But again, if you're looking for a kind of good cotton wear sweater, this is a great pattern for that. Using a nice thick and thin yarn is a great way to get that out of the way for your repertoire. Also, a similar pattern to this is the Raina cardigan from French Little Girl Knits. In terms of general sweater tips, I definitely learned the importance of sweater placement for your buttons. So I put the buttons where it said to put buttons. If I mentioned already, like, I don't use these buttons. And a big part of the reason is because I'm too lazy to take them off and put them where they actually should be. You can see how I'm kind of wearing this. And that button's not coming undone because apparently it's impossible. This top button just doesn't work for my shape or the sweater shape. See where it is? It kind of looks like it does. And I know there are some of you at home who are going like, what are you talking about? That looks absolutely crazy. But remember we talked about how this is a very heavy drape yarn because of the heavy cotton bulkiness of it? Well, it feels like I'm being choked. It really does. Like, that's the only way I can explain it. It's not even comfortable enough for me to keep for a couple seconds of explaining this to you guys. Furthermore, there are so many buttons on this band. I don't know if you guys can see, but there's one there, 2, 3, 4. There's 7 buttons. This only goes down to approximately my hip bone. I probably, if I were to knit this pattern again, or if I was to stop being lazy and pull out the buttons, I think I would probably make sure to try the sweater on before I place those buttons. If I did, I would notice that I would have never ever wanted to button this all the way down. And instead, I'd always want to kind of button it here, where it's most flattering for me. So I guess tip number 1 from Sweater I Love number 1 is don't place your buttons where the pattern says. Place the buttons where you're going to actually wear them, because you've tried on the sweater and you know you need it there, basically. The next sweater I want to show you guys is my Love Braid cardigan by Melissa Worley from the spring 2013 issue of Knitsy. So I know first thing you guys are probably thinking, for those of you who are watching and not just kind of listening in the background, is I thought you said cardigan. And I did. Originally, this was a cardigan. This was actually a cardigan that I started in Cascade Fingering 220 in jury duty. For those of you who aren't familiar with how jury duty works in New York, I think it's a little bit different than most states from what I've understood. You are on call for 2 weeks, and if they call you in, you effectively sit in a room for as many as the rest of the term of your jury duty worth of 8-hour days. And so I snuck some knitting in on bamboo needles. This was pretty small when I was starting it out, so it was pretty easy. And sat there for 3 days. It's a great way. It really was totally a great use of my work days. But here nor there. This was my first fingering weight sweater, and I really felt like it was never, ever, 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 ever going to end. I love working with the wool. It feels so nice. And I know I talk a lot about how I tend to have issues with gauge. This is probably one of my tightest gauge sweaters. What I do love about it, and what I really recommend, fingering weight Cascade 220, which actually has about 273 yards per skein in it, as a good fingering weight sweater wool, is not only just because it's cheap and because you have the good yardage, it is warm. I had that cotton sweater on, obviously, like all of 10 seconds ago in TV time. I can feel like I need to talk less about this cardigan because I'm boiling up. And so, again, I had to do it in fingering weight because of my gauge issues for some reason. I tried to do it in the sport weight, which the pattern called for, and then they tried to do it in DK, and that didn't work. But for fingering, it did. It finally worked. It was great. It was awesome. And this was also my first piece together sweater. So some general tips that I learned about piecing together, about like sweater tip number 2, I guess. God, I really should have had a script for this. Anyway, sweater tip number 2. If you're going to seam something, practice first. Why do I say that? Well, over here, my shoulder seams and all that look awesome. What doesn't look awesome is this totally messy. Maybe I shouldn't have put this one on. But this absolutely, positively messy side seam. If I hold it up kind of to the light, you can see some of those holes there. They shouldn't be there if I did it right. You can also kind of see that this neck looks weird. So effectively, when this was a cardigan, this used to be a cardigan, and I had a lot of issues with the ribbing bind off. It was either too loose or too tight, and I didn't know enough about how to fix it, so I had done the ribbing about 20 times. I frogged it out, I put it back in. I frogged it out, I put it back in. I was absolutely miserable. I never wore it. I got really cranky. When I got a sewing machine, however, I put the 2 wrong sides of the fabric together, and I sewed, and I sewed, and I sewed, and I sewed, and then I cut, and I cut, and I cut, and I cut. And I turned my Love Braid cardigan into a Love Braid pullover. As a result, you can see in certain places, like let me point the camera down really quick. You can see in certain places that it has these weird kind of inward, kind of funky seaming lines. Yeah, I know, but I like it. And I haven't even showed you guys the best feature of this cardigan, which is the back. I really hope I didn't knock that over. So as you can hopefully see, the back of this cardigan has this lovely braided detail. I really love this cardigan because every time I put it on and every time I think about it, I think about that experience of having all these mishaps, having horrible seams, and having a horrible experience with the ribbing, and being miserable with this as a cardigan, and jury duty, and being miserable at jury duty. But then in the end, I turned this into something that I love and that I wear all the time. And so, what's better than that? Now, I know you're supposed to save the best for last, but I'm not even going to pretend that we're doing this. Hands down, I'm wearing my favorite knitted thing ever. That enthusiasm just like wore me out. I feel like I just got a day's worth of cardio out of that. All right. You can see how giddy and excited just wearing this sweater makes me. This is the Artichoke French pullover from the Rhinebeck Sweater book, and the pattern is by Lauren Elkin. The yarn is Studio Worsted by Neighborhood Fiber Company in their Clintonville colorway. I feel like that's enough. Like, I feel like I can say that. And, like, every one of you should be able to look at this and be like, oh, yeah, you're good. To frame the story of this sweater, when I first got the Rhinebeck Sweater book, Artichoke French was not my favorite pattern in it at all. I wasn't really into it until a couple of months later. I met a new friend in the knitting store, and she had mentioned how this was in her queue. It was like one of her favorite patterns ever. And so I took another look at it. And I realized I kind of liked it, but I was intimidated by the pattern. It was right at the time where I'd come up with this absolutely crazy idea that I was going to knit 10 sweaters in like 3 months. And because I was so intimidated by it, I was petrified by this sweater, by the way, guys. This was going to be the first sweater that I knit. This was going to be number one. This was going to be the challenge. If I could do this sweater, I was going to be able to do the whole entire sweater quest. And I remember sitting on the express bus August 1st of 2015 and casting on. And I was so excited. There was such enthusiasm. And then I remember I screwed up. And I remember frogging. And then I remember casting on again. I remember frogging. Now I remember the pattern which makes this, the stitch pattern that makes this pattern is this artichoke leaf pattern. It goes up the sleeves all the way. It also goes down the body, down here. And it goes in the front. Sorry guys, you might have heard an awkward little drop as I dropped what we bootlegged to be a microphone for this. Goes up here. This whole neckline actually is also that artichoke stitch, French stitch down the round. And so I had to work so hard to kind of understand this pattern. And once I did, it was easy because it's a relatively easy pattern. It's not one of those patterns that requires, advanced, super advanced skills or tools or anything like that. It was a really easy pattern. But I just remember being so intimidated by it. And when I finished it, I was up here. This is worked from the bottom up, and then you do the sleeves, and then you put the sleeves on. And I was going in record pace, guys. The body was done in like all of a week. Yeah. And the sleeves were kicking along, and I was doing a great job, and then I stalled. This neckline. there were so many instructions, and so I decided I was going to make the body longer. That's why I can wear this over leggings. It is the kind of the perpetual test of whether or not something is legging bound is obviously, does it cover the bum, the backside? And this totally does. So I can wear it over leggings. Yay! It has built-in fingerless mitts, which I love. I wore this sweater to Rhinebeck last year. I'm pretty sure there was someone as we walked around the festival grounds who, every time I saw her, commented and said, I love that green, I love that sweater. And I'm pretty sure it was Melissa from the Spicy Homemaker podcast. She and I have talked about this before on the Ravelry boards, and neither one of us is quite sure, but it sounds like her. And wouldn't that just be a great kind of way to meet someone? I learned sweater tip number 3. So I'm getting a little bit better at this the more of these really hot things I put on. Is to not be intimidated by a pattern because of your skill level. Before I knit this pattern, I'd probably knit dozens of sweaters. Probably a good couple dozen shawls at least. Why was I scared of what turned out to be a pretty simple top-up pattern? Top-up pattern. Just because of this stitch. And the fact that I thought it looked like cables, and cables really scare me. What gives? That's a dumb reason to not knit something. Don't be scared of something if maybe it looks like it's going to take you a little bit more time or a little bit more effort, because I'm here and this sweater is here and this camera is doing my hair, my complexion, my chair, my wall, but mostly the color of this sweater, no justice. It is a bright, 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 flaming green. And we're all here to tell you, don't let it scare you. There's a lot of words in the instructions. Either figure it out or find someone to help you. I abuse my husband for that effectively. Michael's awesome at reading patterns, and I suck so hard at it. But yeah, don't be scared by a pattern, because you're going to end up with something that you love. And I love a lot of my sweaters, and I think we have 3 more to go through. I wouldn't give up anything in the world for this sweater. I love this thing that very much. And actually, so that you guys can see some of this side seams a little bit better. Yeah. If you love it, make it. Don't be scared. Don't be scared at all. Guys, you can probably tell trying on all of these sweaters is exhausting me because the hair is all up in there. But sweater number 4 today is Navash Narada colorway by Nerd Girl Yarns. Obviously, you guys wouldn't think it's my podcast if there wasn't something from Nerd Girl Yarns on it. And this piece is called Foxy, which is her DK weight silk wool blend. And the first thing I learned when I purchased the yarn for this sweater and it came was that wool silk blends take yarn dye so differently. That's actually like me blocking whatever that is. See how this turns out to be kind of like a light, reflective almost kind of color? It shouldn't be. On true wool basis, this is such a deep color. It is almost like a deep dark black, and I wasn't expecting that. And so that being my first experience with a wool silk blend, I learned things take color differently, and that was really the first time I ever really noticed that. The second thing I learned, and sweater tip number 4 here, is I just told you to not be scared of patterns. I'm going to tell you now to not trust patterns. So this is the French Toast pattern by Alicia Plummer. And I love a lot of that girl's patterns. That girl, it makes some wearable patterns. I'd have to say, for me, probably her and Hannah Fettig, right? Some of the most everyday wearable sweaters that are not only in my queue, but I think on Ravelry. And I really admire that about their aesthetic, because they still find different ways to take stock knit sweater or a mostly stock knit sweater and make it more interesting or make it more tailored. And I think that's really, My husband and the designs that he knits are art. They're just pure art. And it's not the fact that I'm married to him that makes me say that or anything like that. He's just insane. He's on a whole other level. But I think there's something, I think we do sometimes underappreciate how not simple it is to create the simple knit pattern. Just some food for thought there. But the reason I tell you to not trust a pattern is I have a lot of breast. May have noticed that some of these that first sweater, you probably really noticed it. Well, in this pattern, which is a top-down raglan, it's a very simple pattern. I normally would recommend a pattern like this to beginners. It has you start doing the bust decreases here for your waist. Now, I don't know about you, but my bust starts here, not here, here, not here. Goes from here to here to here, and then there's some like back booty in the back too. So starting this decreases all the way up here was just going to give me something that wasn't going to fit. And I read it, and I read it, and I read it, and I thought maybe I'm wrong. So I ran it by Michael, and then I ran it by some friends, and then I ran it pretty much by everyone. And they all kind of said, if you don't need that pattern shaping there, don't put it there. And I listened, and I love this sweater. The sweater is also, as Alicia has designed it, it's a little bit peplummy, and I went a little bit less peplummy. And I also went for more of like a bracelet lace sleeve. But for me, this was one of the first sweaters where I really started to heavily play around with modifying the pattern. I put in additional bust increases here. Let's see. Yeah. So see how it kind of makes this V shaping here? That was not intended in the pattern. That was a modification that I made to make this better fit me. And then again, as you see kind of the full fit of this sweater, it has, again, this beautiful cable running down the front. If I had never done that artichoke French pattern, that would have scared the beheavens out of me. But I made it a little bit less peplummy because that fit my shape. But there's also so much room down here. But I'm not tugging at it. It's such a comfortable sweater. This is the sweater that, a little cold outside, let me throw something on, that I go and I grab. For those very reasons. Because it fits me so well, and I can throw a button-up under it or whatnot. Tip 4A, I think this is sweater 4. I'm not really sure, guys. We're just going to stop numbering them. Is to think about your wardrobe when picking knits. I picked this pattern because I thought it was pretty. And because I thought this color... Come on, camera. It's not going to do. I thought this color needed to be something. I didn't think about how big of a wardrobe staple I was missing with this piece. Or without having this piece. And I'm so grateful that I have it now for that very reason. Everybody loves Tin Can Knits. And everybody loves their Simple Collection, which is a collection of 9 free patterns that are perfect basics for your wardrobe, right? I can't even pretend that concept didn't win me over. And so this is the Harvest Pullover. If I pull it like this, or Harvest Cardigan, gosh. If I pull it like this, it'll look a little bit more traditional with that wide garter band. From Tin Can Knits in the Simple Collection, and the yarn is 8-bit worsted by Nerd Girl Yarns in the Gallifrey colorway. When I think of this sweater, I think of the fact that this was birthday yarn from my husband. He does a great job. But I think of the fact that my biggest knitting tip that comes from this sweater is don't get sold by the story of the sweater. What do I mean by that? Every single knitting pattern, if it's doing its job right on Ravelry, is trying to get you to buy it. If it's free, it's trying to get you to make it for some other reason, marketing or just general good accord or what have you. Guys, I fall for the story every single time. I always want to be that girl who, for whatever reason, is baking cookies midday in her cabin in the woods, and knitting away on all of these precious little things while making socks and wearing a cozy oversized sweater that just fits her to a T, and is walking their dog near the beach. Oh, and look at that. Now they're at a boardwalk. Oh, and now they have cotton candy. What? Now there's a fire going and they have a glass of wine? Oh, they're at a coffee shop. I always want to be the girl in the patterns. And for the harvest pattern, it is a beautiful Madeline Tosh colorway that they use for the main sample pattern. And, I want to be that girl. She's playing in the woods. She's wearing that beautiful sweater. I get sold. And so I made a beautiful harvest cardigan. There's a lot of shaping in here for me. I tend to do, I don't know if we've talked about this, but I tend to do my shaping down the back just because that's where I need it. It, as far as a raglan goes, it fits me as a cardigan should. It fits me with ease. It has that perfect sleeve length that I'm always going for. It is cozy. It is slightly oversized. I can pin it right here with a shawl pin and have the perfect kind of wrap cardigan. It doesn't make me look pregnant. It has all the things I look for in clothing. It's a beautiful, vibrant, crazy as all get out colorway as well. If you haven't noticed, it's orange and reds and funky, funky, funky fabulous. Perfect for me. When they pulled the sweater off of the needles, I just remember feeling so, with it. I was so disappointed. I was like, oh, that's my sweater. Because I wasn't looking at it like, hey, I have this great, for me, everyday wearable cardigan that fits me nice and is going to coordinate with lots of stuff and looks good on me, and I handmade this. I should be really proud of it no matter what, right? Well, I was upset because I wasn't in the woods wearing and having one that fit exactly like that one, and I think the colorway was glazed pecan, which I love. I wasn't living in the story. And when you hear that, you're like, that's really stupid. Yeah, no, I'm really good at admitting how stupid I am, but think about how many patterns you've looked at and you go, oh, that's scenery. Or how many times you've looked at a pattern that's photographed on the beach and you go, oh, I want to be on the beach. Or you get swayed by some of the marketing language. I'm in marketing, so I understand how this goes, but you're 10 times more likely to buy something that says, this, this lush coastal pullover is perfect for those in-between days where you want to look stylish, chic, and cozy, but don't want to be too warm or too cold. The perfect convertible knit. We'd all buy that. That's just beautiful language, as opposed to, buy my sweater, it's really pretty. We all fall to that. And so I would just caution you that if you really, really, really want to be at the beach right now, and it's 1,000 degrees, and I'm a water person, I'm basically a fish out of water, trained lifeguard, all of that. I want to be at the beach, looking out the window as if maybe it'll magically appear closer to my apartment than it actually is. Probably not going to happen. If you want to be at the beach or you want to be in that crazy cabin, that's one thing, but don't let the fact that you're not the girl in the sweater sway you too much. Particularly in my case, I'm a big girl. Like, I can't hide that from you. It's a video podcast. If this was audio, I could be like, I'm 5'12" and I'm really, really petite and I wear a size 22 waist, and I could say whatever I want if this is an audio podcast. It didn't have to be true. But I'm not a petite little girl. I'm a big girl. And I know that about myself. And it's not something I'm ashamed of. It's not something I'm always happy with, but it's not something I'm ashamed of. So, for me, I always look at girls in these sweaters and they're perfectly sized and they look so beautiful. And I always want to be them. But I can't be anyone but me. So that's that sweater tip. Don't try to be the girl in the sweater on the beach. Maybe put on your sweater that you just made and go to the beach instead. So for these last two sweaters, first off, Molly. She wanted to come say hello. Say hi. Hi, little girl. Go cause torment. I don't know half the time what she smells like. Now, for these last 2 sweaters, I thought a change of scenery was necessary, / the lighting was starting to die a little bit over by the chair. And so we're back. This sweater is the Union Station cardigan. And this, as you can see, unlike the Lovebraid cardigan, it remained a cardigan. This is by a designer whose name I'm so sorry I've unfortunately forgotten. But it was in the spring 2014 issue of Interweave Knits. And for me, this sweater holds a lot of story. So I hate sweaters that start with a neckband. This one does. You're actually, hold up real quick, guys. You guys are rocking, and I'm probably pretty sure you're not enjoying that ride. Okay. So for me, this particular sweater has so much of a story to it I want to share with you guys. Not a fan of sweaters that start at a neckband. And of course this one does. It ended up, I thought this was going to be a quick knit. It is in the Wine Sap colorway of Chickadee by Quince & Co. Yarns. And it has all of my favorite things. It has lace. It has that perfect length kind of a sleeve. And for me, by the way, you may have noticed I refer to anything as a perfect length sleeve if it's anywhere between here and like here. Last year, when this sweater came out, I needed to have my gallbladder removed. And so this sweater kind of got backburnered for a little bit. And when it came back onto the needles, it came back with a vengeance. I finished it faster than anything I'd ever finished before at that point. And I adore this thing. I would say after the French Toast by Alicia Plummer sweater that I just shown to you guys, I wear this more than any other of my knits. Which is kind of funny because I'm not a red person. I don't wear a lot of red. Red doesn't tend to look good on me. I don't know if you think it does. Red's just not my color. But here I am wearing it every day. It has this interesting shaping where it likes to think that it'll be held up by the bust alone. It doesn't. For me, at the very least, it totally does not. I needed something to hold it here, and so I have a button that holds it in place. Otherwise, as you can see, it kind of just falls a little forward for me. But you can see if I hold this up a little bit, you can see that shaping, and I think for most people, that bust would work. I think that's a great feature right into the pattern. I also like the way, and hopefully you can kind of see it here, the lace pattern kind of extenuates down through the back of the sweater. So the lace is a little bit wider of a pattern. I like that. I like that little bit of variation. And I also, oh guys, this is my favorite detail. It's got a seed stitch. Instead of ribbing, seed stitch. What? I know. It was actually, to me, at least at that point, it was like the most unique thing that ever happened to me. So what do I like about this cardigan? The first thing I really like is the story. I mean, I always remember this as something that, in a weird way, nursed me back to health. What's my tip? My tip is to always remember to understand that natural fiber wools will pill. Can you see that? Maybe, maybe not. It is like pill city up in this. This sweater, while I wear it so frequently, pills so very, very much. Sad. But natural fibers do that. There's always this kind of tendency, and I see it a lot in Ravelry comments, where people are like, oh no, this yarn pills. Something must be wrong with it. Well, what's wrong with it is that it's a natural fiber. Natural fibers will inherently pill over time, over wear, in spots where there's a lot of friction, particularly throughout this region a lot for a lot of people, right? I guess I didn't go into this cardigan thinking about the yarn choice. And so when it started to pill, I got so bummed. But it's always something to think about with your knits. I have a sweater that I will not show you because it is not something I am extremely proud of. And I may or may not have worn it on my first episode, I'm not sure. My first sweater is knit in Malabrigo worsted, which pills so much being a singles yarn. Think about these things when you're trying to make a sweater. Is a single yarn best for that particular sweater? Will it get a lot of friction and pill? Will the pilling ruin the sweater? Will you hate it because there's some pills on it? Then maybe you want something with a little bit more twist. Chickadee is not, as you guys can see kind of from these ends, it is not the twistiest or high twist of yarns. It's a very kind of low twist. I love it. Chickadee is definitely one of my favorite yarns, but it's not the high twistiest. Think about these things so that your finished objects inspire you to wear them. This might be a little bit trippy for you guys. It seems like every cut I change outfits. So this sweater that I'm currently wearing is the Tucker pullover from the cover of this past 2015's cover of Interweave Knits. I saw the sweater and I saw it online before magazines were available in stores, and this cable, this infinity cable across the top, reminded me so much of a pattern by Uni Jang from many years ago called the Tingled Yoke Pullover. And I don't do cables. Those of you who know me know I'm so scared of cables. I'm not so much scared of them as they make me angry. Doing a swatch with cables makes me so angry. But I saw the sweater and guys, it was a love affair. It was an immediate love affair. And so I started swatching and I was like, it's okay. There's only like 27 rows of cables. It can't be that bad. And it wasn't. The yarn used here is Cascade Longwood in, I think, some funky number colorway. As with my Chickadee cardigan over here, it is an all natural 100% wool. So pill, baby, pill. So many pills. This needs a good session with my gleaner. But I love this thing. I think what I learned from this sweater that I knit last summer is sometimes you do need to push yourself outside of your boundaries. I knit this right after my artichoke French, so I felt like I was on top of the world. I can do absolutely anything because I did one sweater that intimidated me. Why not do another? And why not do another? I think that's what I'm coming to, and I think that's why I've lost so much of my knit joe recently. Is I don't want to knit things just to say, hey guys, look at this, I totally made this today. I don't want to knit things for the podcast. I don't want to knit things to tell my knitting friends I knit things, or for the Harry Potter Knitting Crochet Cup that I'm a part of, Ravelry. I don't want to knit things just to impress people with the number of things that I knit, or with the yarns that I used, or anything like that. I want to knit things because I want to knit things. And these things have a place in my life, in my wardrobe, on my body. Not every sweater flatters me. I've learned yoke sweaters don't tend to flatter me. Stop knitting yoke sweaters if they don't tend to flatter you, or if you don't love it, or if it doesn't inspire you. I'm thinking to a certain extent, maybe my knit show isn't so much a result of just a turn in my spirit. Maybe it's just growing up in my knitting career and realizing that, I've picked up spinning. I'm holding a tuft of fiber from last week's podcast that was left on our kitchen table when I was done. Maybe it's not about volume. And I am a project knitter. I don't enjoy the process as much as the finished thing. But maybe just maybe it is about the process of getting to that finished thing. I love wearing my knitwear. I'm not someone who tends to want it to be in the closet, but I also don't want to wear something that I don't love. I have enough body issues all on my own. And I'll need something that I've knit, that I've spent all these hours on, contributing to that, you know? I want to love everything that I wear. I think that's why I get so frustrated with quilting a lot of the times, is because the quilts that I've made, they're not necessarily fancy quilts. Actually, here, I'll give you an example real quick. Just hold on one quick second. Thank you for waiting. God, I hate when people normally say that on podcasts, and now I'm the one doing it. Oh well. This is a quilt top that I had made, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get far back enough, but I made last summer. It's just simple 9-patch, simple squares, a lot of Downtown Abbey fabrics, if you're familiar with that fabric line. We use it as kind of a more summer throw quilt. The back is just a basic backing fabric, nothing special. I did not put too much effort into this horrific binding. I mean, it's a mess. It's a use quilt. It's, for all intents and purposes, it's cold, let's put on the quilt kind of quilt. That's fine. We all need use items, but I guess like I said, I'm coming around to the idea that my handmaids need more. I need more. I need to give them more. And so I guess my final sweater tip is just that. Don't make things you don't want to make. Don't make things you don't love. Don't make things for knit-alongs that you're not interested in. Don't make things because you really like the prize, or because you really love that podcast, because I do that a lot. Don't make things to impress someone, or because everyone else is doing it. If you're not a sock knitter, you're not a sock knitter. If you hate knitting sweaters, you hate knitting sweaters. Do what you love because you love it, with things that you love and materials that you love, for finished things that you're going to love. And love them and use them. And enjoy that craftiness that comes with that handmade life. I guess that's the end. That's all I've really got. I didn't really plan this episode, so I can end it anywhere I want. It's my own episode for my own podcast that there's like 20 of you watching. So again, my name is Tanya. You can find me, and I didn't actually say this, you can find me on Ravelry or Instagram as TKnitPearl, and you can find this group. We do have a group for this podcast. It is a Creative Knit Tensions podcast group on Ravelry. Please find us, talk, say something. It looks really sad sitting there on my Ravelry dashboard, and I kind of want to leave my own group because there's no activity, but then I think there'd be something really sad with that. So come on over, join, let's talk. Let's get some conversation going. What's the last thing that you made that you really wanted to love, but you didn't? Or what's the last thing that you made with the wrong intentions? You made to impress someone, or for knit along, but you weren't really in love with it. I want to hear. Let's talk about these things and figure out how we can all be better, happier knitters. Till next time, this has been, I think, episode 6. Have a knitty week.